Welcome back to the last episode of MSP TV. We're standing outside the conference room where the conference just wrapped up somewhat early. The first meeting of states parties of the Tpnw has concluded. We'll hear later on in the show from the Mexican ambassador who has been appointed as a chair designate of the second meeting of state parties. But first we're here with Tim Wright of ICANN. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. And we want to hear some first impressions. I mean, there was quite the applause and enthusiasm in the room. First meeting concluded. How do you feel?
Yeah, it was an amazing atmosphere in the room, a very strong commitment by the states parties to bring this treaty to life and to make it have a huge effect in moving disarmament forward. They adopted by consensus a 50-point action plan. This is a really serious, thorough document that we can work with to implement the treaty. And they also adopted a really, really strong political declaration that condemns all threats of nuclear use and says that we need to work together to completely eliminate nuclear weapons. It's the most powerful kind of political document that I've seen of this nature adopted at the United Nations.
Yeah, quite a lot of superlatives. I mean, even the chair of a UN conference, usually quite a state, very serious affair, using words such as historic meeting, and it was very clear that something particular had happened when this document was finally adopted. And indeed, as you say, the condemnation is very strong. It, in fact, it was a view to the nuclear threats that we've that have brought nuclear weapons very much into the news in the last few months. The state parties have a strong condemnation of any and all nuclear threats and show themselves alarmed and dismayed by them. So these are really strong words for a document adopted by consensus by so many states. What does that tell us about how this treaty also empowers these states?
Yeah, I mean, this is a way of responding to nuclear threats, and the Russia's nuclear threats earlier this year are very much weighing on the minds of people in this part of the world, people all around the world. And this isn't the first time a country has threatened to use nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, it probably won't be the last, but what we saw today was a very clear condemnation of that by the international community, the countries that have joined this treaty and said enough, that we need to do away with these weapons, and that this kind of behavior is completely unacceptable, whether it's Russia making the threats, whether it's the United States or any other nuclear armed state. They need to end that kind of dangerous rhetoric, and they need to start taking their disarmament obligations seriously, all the way to zero nuclear weapons.
You mentioned a action plan with 50 items. We're going to come back to that in a moment. Let's first have a look at what the Mexican ambassador had to say. We are here just after the finishing of the meeting of states parties of the Tpnw, and we are joined by Ambassador Luis Campuzano.
Hello. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. You have been here in the room, the man of the hour. Mexico was to great acclaim just elected as chair of the second meeting of states parties, so that was really quite a raucous reception in there. So thank you so much for taking the few minutes to come out and speak with us.
Thank you very much. Actually, we are very grateful to Austria for having hosted this very important first meeting. And of course, there's the absolute commitment of Mexico to continue with the second MSP.
Indeed, there's a very positive atmosphere all around here after the conclusion of this historic meeting. And so I wanted to ask you also about the significance of Mexico taking over from Austria, given that your country already played such a fundamental role in the lead up to the adoption of the treaty. Can you tell us more about the reasons for that and Mexico's commitment to a nuclear weapon-free world?
Thank you. Well, as you know, Mexico has been a promoter of disarmament and non-proliferation for already many decades. We have a Nobel Peace Prize, Garcia Robles, and that got this distinction precisely for the Tlatelolco Treaty. and creating the first nuclear weapons-free zone in the highly dense territories. So since then, Mexico has been very committed to all the processes of disarmament and non-proliferation, also with the CTBT. We played a very, very fundamental role. And with we hosted the second humanitarian the conference on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons in Nayarit. If I recall correctly, it was in 2013. That was also a prelude to this strong effort to build up, to have this treaty. We had also a very important role in the negotiation of the Tpnw that finally we were very happy of having it enter into force already in January 2021. We participated very, very strongly in the preparation of this first meeting, with collaborating with the core group, and also very committed to show the complementarity of this treaty with all the international architecture and disarmament and non-proliferation.
And you mentioned that the president of the next meeting of states parties would be your colleague in New York. So the conference is going to be held at the end of November 2023 in New York. Can you tell me more about these choices?
Yes, of course. We think that it's extremely important to have the participation of as many countries as possible, and also to have very, very close linkage to the UN, because this is also something that we have to stress, and that's why I also mentioned the complementarity with the whole nuclear disarmament and the no proliferation regime. And from this perspective, we consider that having it in this venue, we will send a very, very good message, at least at the initial phase, of the linkage between our treaty and the UN organization, as well as facilitating the participation not only of member states from the whole world, but also from very, very important stakeholders as ICANN.
Thank you very much. So really the symbolism of having the treaty at the headquarters of the United Nations, and the inclusivity of having all the countries represented there. So now that the MSP has wrapped up, there's been lots of talk of historic moment, very positive atmosphere. Can you tell me more about the significance of this MSP, and maybe also take the opportunity to speak about the political declaration that was adopted?
Well, I think that having this first MSP was very successful, because we were able to adopt a program of action, plan of action, in order to create an institutional structure that will make the implementation of the treaty possible. Therefore, all the provisions that are contained in the plan of actions are very, very relevant for this purpose. And it was also very important to have a strong message, a united message about the need to eliminate and to prohibit these weapons of mass destruction that have no place for security for countries, because they're giving a false sense of security. We need, as humankind, to get rid of these arms.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, and also for your government's role in really advancing the treaty, and now even taking over as the chair of the next meeting of states parties, and for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations again, and best of luck with your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And we're back with Tim Wright of ICANN. You mentioned the action plan that was also adopted today. And you said it's not just an aspirational document, but very concrete. So how does the work continue now? What happens from here?
Yeah, I think this document really shows the seriousness with which the states parties are taking their obligations under the treaty. There's a lot of emphasis on universalizing the treaty, bringing more countries on board. And of course, the states parties have said in the document that they want to work with ICANN, that they want to work with the International Committee of the Red Cross in doing that. There are also actions relating to victim assistance and environmental remediation. This treaty isn't just a ban on nuclear weapons. I shouldn't say just a ban on nuclear weapons. I mean, that's a big deal in itself, of course, but it's a treaty that provides for people who have been harmed by nuclear weapons around the world, whether through their use or their testing. And so the states parties are wanting to make sure that those aspects of the treaty are properly implemented too. And they've been talking about setting up an international trust fund to make that happen. And it would be possible for countries, even outside the treaty, to contribute to such a fund. There's an advisory committee that's been established, a scientific advisory committee. It's making sure that all of the decisions taken by the states parties are informed by the latest science on what nuclear weapons do when they're used, their climatic impacts and their radiological impacts and all of those various aspects. The states parties agreed on a deadline of 10 years for destroying and eliminating the nuclear stockpiles of any nuclear armed state that joins the treaty. So this was a key decision of this conference. A country that currently hosts nuclear weapons of another country on its territory, if they're to join the treaty, they've got 90 days to remove those weapons. That's another decision that was taken here this week. So a lot of work has been put into preparing for this conference, and that really showed because there was so much agreement among the states parties and really concrete and well considered proposals put forward and agreed upon.
So really laying the groundwork for the concrete implementation of the treaty beyond the aspiration of banning nuclear weapons. And I saw one snippet in the final declaration that I wanted to read out quickly because I think it also really speaks to the mindset that the many states that are represented in this treaty have been extolling here at this conference. And it's that the state parties, in the face of the catastrophic risks posed by nuclear weapons and in the interest of the very survival of humanity, we will not rest until the last state has joined this treaty, until the last warhead has been dismantled. I mean, this borders on the verge of the poetic. It's really a strong language to come from a conference of sovereign nations coming together at the United Nations. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really beautiful statement. And we, as ICANN, have pledged to work with the states parties until every last nuclear weapon is eliminated from the world.
So the work continues, and we hope that you can join us at ICANN and bringing this to the conclusion. Thank you for having been with us at MSP TV throughout this week. This concludes Nuclear Ban Week. There's been a number of different conferences. We hope to have made a contribution to bring this closer to everyone around the world and give a good impression of what we've been up to here, all the various communities that have come together, states, survivors, civil society, academics, and so on and so forth. This wraps up Nuclear Ban Week. There will be just one agenda item left. There's a party at Volksgarten Pavillon. So if you are in Vienna, make sure to join us there tonight. And thanks for joining us. Thank you for having me with us.
Thanks. We'll see you all at the second meeting of states parties, which is in New York next year.
In November 2023.
That's right. Yep.
All right. See you there.
Decided.